Getting cloud agnostics to manage complexity of multi-cloud. Hi everyone, I'm Jon Myer from Myer Media, and joining us today is Matthias, who's the Chief Product Officer at Emma. Matthias, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Matthias, what is your role at Emma?
Well, I'm running product, so I'm trying to figure out on how to evolve our product, listening to customers most of the time, speaking with other vendors, seeing where the industry is going, and being here trying to present our message of being cloud agnostic. Yeah.
What is Emma?
Emma is a multi-cloud management platform. So we manage, different cloud providers, different services, as our clients want to, not only use one specific cloud provider, maybe their major cloud provider, but they want to spin out for various reasons, right? But they have the need to manage multiple cloud providers. So that's what we help them with our platform.
Matthias, do you really think, strongly feel that multi-cloud exists in most, if not all, companies?
Well, there's always these numbers. We obviously have our view on the world, but I do think it's there, and I do think it will become more prevalent. There's new services coming out, so if you just want to use the latest and greatest. I've been talking to customers and say, well, we've just transitioned from one cloud provider to the other, and then they transition to another one again, and you always know these projects take long and they then stop, so you have something in the middle. Yeah, I think the majority of bigger customers and medium-sized businesses have multiple providers, and they will have in the future, I'm pretty sure.
Is there a difference between multi-cloud and a hybrid cloud type of environment where you do have the clouds, but you're halfway on premises, but you're diving into clouds?
Well, there's a difference. It depends of how you are able to manage your on-prem environment. I personally, for me, as long as it has an API, I don't care too much, right? So there are certain challenges that are on-prem. We focus on we have our on-prem integration, but we do focus on cloud providers. The API is important that it's really that you can automate things around it. Yeah.
Matthias, can you talk to me a little bit about the state of multi-cloud?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's again, it's becoming prevalent. Everyone is using it, and we've seen this with different types of providers and different challenges of customers. While in the first wave of using one cloud provider, and now they have multiple different types of cloud providers, people really face challenges of managing these, and while they are kind of pressured for different reasons, they feel challenges in managing these multiple cloud providers.
Can you dive into a little bit more of the challenges of managing these multiple clouds?
Sure. I think there's different, and we can talk about details, but for me it all boils down to complexity. It's while there are certain standards, and we can talk about that in a second, but many things are still, if you use special breed services here and special breed services there, there's always these little nuances, right? That is hard for customers to work with, users to work with. And it just increases the complexity. If you take away, or if you are able to manage that complexity, I think most of the other challenges will go away that customers face today.
Matthias, some of the challenges that I see for running a multi-cloud is, one, the inherence of a cloud, right? The acquisition,
right.
Another company coming in, you have shadow IT building out something, right. New services that are available to you versus another cloud, discounts, cost savings, proximity, closed data sovereignty. I mean, those are just a handful off the top of my head. Right. How do you really tackle or even visualize some of these challenges for customers?
Visualize is a good way. I think the first part is really making sure you have a view on the world, right? Really making sure that you understand of what's running where, and that you have a holistic view. I think a lot of companies are failing on that point already, right? It's like, okay, they might not even know, right? It's like on some budget and things are floating up. Yep. Yeah, I mean, so one approach, and if we're getting into that topic, right, being cloud agnostic, I think for a certain type of workload, the way we try to approach this is, harmonizing things and making sure that the workloads, the things that you're working with, not everything, but a certain piece of the architecture is cloud agnostic. So you can basically have the same view that you have on a certain part of your system, independent of where it runs in the cloud. Now, you have to do something a little bit about it, but we think it's not like a certain abstraction, a certain cloud agnostic view on the world is the way to handle it.
So your view on the world, or even like multi-cloud, is don't care what cloud you're using behind the scene, let us manage, let us visually help you on the front end, and wherever your workload is, you get to actually decide the area that it's located in, but don't concern yourself with it. Let us do the concerning to handle some of the complexity.
Let us, or do it yourself. I mean, I'm happy to do it, but I'm also
well,
preaching.
let Emma do it.
Let Emma, but I'm also like preaching for the idea itself, right? And so I'm not saying like make everything abstract and everything. Like if you have a specific AWS service, specific Azure GCP service, whatever, right, and you're happy with it, go for it. But what I'm saying is like, if look at your application, look at your architecture, and reason about it. Like, what of these parts do really need to be, that close tied to a specific instance, and where can I, with a little bit of effort or help as Emma, make sure that you can run somewhere else. And you see a lot of benefits with it, being independent about a cloud provider and moving things left to right. So yeah, the cloud agnosticism of your parts of your application architecture, is that what I meant? Not everything, but the parts of it.
I was just about to ask you on, can everything really be cloud agnostic, or can we eventually get there that we don't care what cloud we're in, our application can run and breathe wherever it's at?
In theory, yes. Computer, I'm a geek, and everything is a computer, right? At the end of the day, and you can run on it. If that's worth it, that's a totally another question. I don't think that for most customers it's worth it to reinvent everything and put everything on the cloud, run everything on your own. I'm not suggesting that, but I do think the core of your application, your compute, right? Major compute is running on VMs and containers. Why should that be dependent on a specific implementation? You should be able to move it, and you should practice it, right? That's what we're doing with our customers. They just choose which cloud provider and which instance, maybe on different parameters, one node being cheaper than the other, and they just deploy it, and it's transparent to them. Now, it's still compute, right? So you need to reason about, make sure that the performance is right, that the connectivity is right, but, a platform as Emma is just helping you with that.
Because one of the other issues doing a multi-cloud environment is the skill sets on handling those, because, as an AWS engineer, I understand all the AWS services, right. Azure, GCP, Wasabi, all those take a special skill set. You can be a generalist in all of it, but one of the biggest things is it comes down to managing all these multi-clouds.
Right. Yeah, and again, if you have a special type of services in AWS, you will still need that, and you will still need to do this. But for the core, one of the major drivers for being cloud agnostic is Kubernetes, right? So I would say, if you have in your organization you're using Kubernetes, right? I think becoming a skilled Kubernetes developer with a little bit of, speaking of AWS, a little bit of EKS specialty, I think that's the more important skill, right? Because you can transition that from one provider to the next.
I think you're the first person in a while that I talked to that says not everything needs to move and be cloud agnostic. There's certain areas, certain things that you want to run on, certain things. And it's a realist.
I want to be practical, right? I mean, there's a certain vision of where we're going, but at the end of the day, you have only so much to invest into it, right? You also need to build your software, evolve it, etc. So I do think, I'd also think that the architecture is going to be cleaner if you start reasoning about it, but I also want to stay practical. We don't need to boil the ocean. We don't need to move everything. Start where it makes sense.
I guess the other challenging question I have for you is, how do we fix this? How do we resolve some of the multi-cloud? How do we get visualization into multi-cloud? Like, what's some of the approaches we should take?
So I've, since I've joined Emma and starting to get a feel of the whole ecosystem, I'm starting to advocate for it. and it's really interesting. There's a couple of Kubernetes. There's a couple of things that I would advocate for getting started, right? Use some open source standards like Kubernetes, OpenTelemetry, etc. We can talk about the details, but the funny part is when I was going out and talking to folks, it's not so much about technology. Folks know what to do. It's more about a cultural thing, right? So what I'm now trying to advocate a little bit more is getting a culture into the organizations of saying, this is a thing, right? It's like, on the decision makers, high level, like CIOs level, it might not always be apparent, and that's what I'm advocating for. They say, well, we're in the cloud, that's all good, right? And it's like, maybe not, right? Maybe you need to think a little bit further and think about some certain, ways of doing it. And I think the technicians, they know what to do. They have their AWS experiences, etc. So there's also a little bit of doing there. But I think most of the engineering organizations do. But we do need to change the culture. So I'm trying to a little bit advocate for certain standard principles, standard ways of working. And I hope that some of the conversations in the organizations get going that way.
More like a top-down approach that, hey, listen, we need to be innovated. We need to start looking at visualization multi-cloud because the engineers know how to be
awareness, right? Top-down, I'm not. I mean, that would be nice, especially for us, right? If there's a mandate to do it, and we sometimes see this, and then we help the organization. But I just general awareness, right? Of if you choose a technology, if you choose a new technology, that's great, but have an exit strategy in mind. At least, it's like we're choosing this technology because it does ABC. And by the way, if we want to decommission it at some point, this is what's going to happen. Think about it, right? And not just move from one because this is now the hype, but what would happen if we want to transition away from this in 5 years' time? And if it doesn't happen, great, but at least be ready for it.
Doesn't it take a lot of skill sets to refactor the application in order to get it cloud agnostic, in order to handle it?
If you don't think about it, there are some challenges. If you don't think about it from the get-go, there are some challenges.
When you design the application, migrating or refactoring in order to migrate to the cloud? Or?
So yeah, I mean, and that's what folks are already doing today, right? I mean, they're migrating to the cloud, and certain things need to be re-architected. And in that phase, start thinking about not specific cloud, but any cloud, so to say. So yes, it is some effort, but also as we get the advantages from just going on-prem to a specific cloud, what I'm saying is if you make it cloud agnostic, you will see not the real benefits, but you will see additional benefits of just, and also cleaner architecture. You have more, if you reason about what would happen if I take it away, you start reasoning about the whole architecture again. So I think it's just best practice, I hope.
I like that cloud agnostic is a good approach, right? It's not a end all, everybody has to be cloud agnostic for every application because it won't work for that. It sounds really nice, but what are some of the approaches to even get started to doing this? What are some of the things that we should think about? At what period of time should we think about them in order to be cloud agnostic?
Right. So I touched upon the first one, right? So if you choose a technology, please think about what happens if for some reason it's taken away. And I had the conversations yesterday again where it's out of your hand from an engineering perspective. Just someone says we're moving to the other cloud, or we're moving that technology and replacing it with that one, and you need to think about it. So spend a little bit of time on it. The other one is, as I said, also is visibility. Just make sure that you have a holistic visibility. And the tools are out there. You just need to do the work. And if we, one big driver for many of the conversations is cost, right? So see of what the standards are doing, what the FinOps Foundation is doing, in defining these standards. Start using them. The other two parts of if you really become cloud agnostic, I think is just keeping back of your head and be ready to do it, is not every cloud provider is 100% the same. So make sure that you have best practices in testing the performance of your application, right? And this can be, a standard performance test or something. Not advocating for something special, but something we did see is that you're moving one application to another, and just because of a different CPU generation, you see suddenly very different patterns. So kind of like prepare that. And the last thing is connectivity. If you start moving, make sure that you have a connectivity base layer network that you can span around the different cloud providers.
Matthias, there's a lot of tools out there that say they're cloud agnostic, right, and handle some of those. How do you really differentiate the tools and understanding the variations on true cloud agnostic to be in a multi-cloud environment? Like, I could have one that says I go between these two, and I got one of these. Probably 10, 20 different tools. Like, how do I figure out the best one for me? What are some of the key components of a tool that I might be looking for?
That's a tough one. To be honest, I think it's an individual question of how your application and how your application architecture looks like. Again, I think I would always start with following with best practice industry standards, right? Touch upon Kubernetes, OpenTelemetry, certain type of backing services such as Postgres, Kafka, Redis. If a certain type of application service, infrastructure service has reached a certain maturity and prevalence in the industry, that's a good way to start with. A general claim, I feel hesitant to put out the general claim, right? I want to make sure that it's like, if there might be reasons why you're running your specific container on that specific VM, right? Yep. There still might be reason, but again, I think for a big part of the application that doesn't need to be the case.
You talked a lot about Kubernetes, and I want to dive in there. We got a couple more minutes. I want to dive into something here. Sure. Wasn't Kubernetes cloud agnostic? Like, can I just deploy it in the cloud? I mean, they all have different API calls, so shouldn't I just be able to actually just deploy it in each one?
Yes, you should. I mean, that's.
I should, but can I? I should ask that question.
Well, and you can, but the point is that many organizations are binding themselves to specifics where they don't need to specifics of the cloud provider within their container. So the Kubernetes cluster does define the abstraction, but then they are starting to use specific tools. And I understand, right? It makes lives easier, but I'm always wondering if using that specific integration is really, really needed. At the end of the day, you need to practice it. Practice from going from one cloud provider to the other. In our case, what we've done for a Kubernetes cluster, we expanded that, and we allow to have different nodes running on different cloud providers. So you can do that even within a single Kubernetes cluster. You can move your workload from one cloud provider to the other and just span it and have the Kubernetes magic do its job and start being multi-cloud without doing anything.
Is that taking the abstraction away from the engineer who's deploying it? They see it within, Emma, they see that they can move from one node to another to different cloud providers, and they don't even have to know where it's at, they just have to know it's running?
They don't need to. If they want to, right, they can choose, right? So, classic example is that you want to use a specific service and you want to make sure that the container is running near that service. So, make sure that the container is deployed on AWS, GCP, wherever. But if they don't want to, they don't. They can say, I want to make sure that this thing is running in Germany, right? And that's all I care about. And yeah, that's what we do.
Emma's handling that on the back end, so you understand all the API calls that have to for every cloud, for all the cloud providers, to handle the multi-cloud and be agnostic. And it doesn't matter. You say, hey, I want to run this, and I would love to run this here, or Emma can manage it, and you'll automatically deploy it as an engineer. I can do it myself, but you can handle a lot of the automation.
Exactly. It's the question for me, again, also as an engineer and, talked with a lot of platform teams, for me, it's always about enabling if you want to dive deeper. But if I don't care, if I don't want to care, then I don't care, right? That's like, okay, make sure, it has a certain compliance is something, big in Europe, obviously, but also getting here. But, making sure there's a certain compliance, it runs within a certain region, yada, yada. And then just use whatever cloud provider someone else has decided to do. In the organization, you might choose one or two or three providers, and that these providers are chosen, and maybe I don't care. And then again, another type of the application I really particularly care because I want to use that special new service that from Amazon and from AWS, and make sure that that I have a good connection to it. So again, the point being is if you don't want to care and you only care about certain other non-technical aspects of like where these things run, the cost of it, then you're free to not care.
All right, hang tight right there. Is there any question I didn't ask you that you want me to ask? Well, Matthias, I really appreciate it. Before we actually wrap things up, where can people go to find more information?
Well, mr.ms is our homepage, and there's tons of work. I forgot the URL about Kubernetes. Maybe we can post it somewhere. mr.ms is probably the best way to get started, and don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always happy to talk about these type of conversations. Yep. I love it. So if you have a concrete problem and concrete use case, you say, I'm not sure if that works with cloud. Reach out. I'm happy to reason about it.
Basically, you sign yourself up for a bunch of LinkedIn messages. I'm just.
All right.
I hope you don't mind.
Bring it on.
Matthias, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure. All right, everybody. This has been Myer Media. I'm Jon Myer. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify because guess what? We're out of here.